Watch it guys, if you're looking to build yourself a home theatre PC but don't have a lot of money to spare, then we're going to be building this home theatre PC for £300. And we haven't skimped on the quality of parts. All the parts are good branded parts, and we'll be putting these together in this video. Now, it's really easy nowadays to build your own computer. There's no real difficulty involved. Everything has been simplified, and if you watch this video you'll see how easy it is. So first, let's start off with the case. We're going to be using the Silverstone ML03. This is an entry-level case, but it's still a very decent case for our build. Okay. Now we're also going to need a few fans, so we're going to be using 2 fans here for the Arctic F8 series. They've got a 6-year warranty on them. We haven't skimped on the quality of fans because we're going to be needing to cool that down. We're going to be using a low-profile heatsink here. We're also using an AMD processor. That's why we've gone for a low profile heatsink. We've got our Blu-ray player, which is a Pioneer Blu-ray player, and we're going to also be using a 2TB drive. Now that is a relatively medium sort of size drive. It's not the largest, but that's what we could afford. And we're also going for the Corsair CX430. Now you may be thinking that might be a bit overkill, could have gone for a 350 watt. We could have done, but it was the same price. So we went for the XMS3, 4GB of 1600 MHz of RAM. That's all we're going to need for this build. And also we've gone for the A6 Richland processor. This is an APU processor with our GPU built into the actual CPU there. Now you can use the A4 as well, which is only £24, but we're going to be using also the MSI motherboard. Now I do like MSI motherboards. They're pretty decent and have got good build quality. As you can see here, this one is packed. It's only 35 quid for this, and they've packed some decent features in here. You've got a nice black PCB motherboard, dark choke, solid caps, high temperature protection, EMI protection. You've got loads of decent protection here for this type of motherboard. Since it's going to be in our little tiny case, it's going to give it great protection there from the heat and stuff like that. Now you can use whatever parts you want, but we're going to be using these parts. So let's get the motherboard out onto the box, and we're going to be putting in our 2 components, which is our CPU and our memory. Okay, and there is a difference between AMD and Intel. Okay, as you can see here, I'll show you a little bit later on with the CPU. You'll see this little bar here. We need to pull this up, and this will allow us to put the CPU into the socket there. Now, that some people call them APUs, which that's what they are called, but we're going to call it CPU. You can see these 2 lugs on the side here, and that's because AMD use a different method for their heat sinks to be mounted. Okay, so let's pull out our CPU and you'll see the difference between these. Okay, so they've got a slightly different size heat shield here. It's quite a bigger heat shield for the AMD processor. You can see the pins are actually on the chip. Okay, they're not actually on the board. So when you look at these, you want to be very careful and inspect these to make sure none of these pins are bent. Now we're going to have to use the stock heatsink in this video because I did try to use the other heatsink and I had a bit of a problem with the bracket, so it's had to go back. So we're going to be using the stock one, as you can see here. But if you have got another heatsink, I would try to use that if possible. So here we have our CPU. And you can see there's a little arrow on the side. It's pretty simple really. You just have to match that up to the motherboard, and you can see the pins on the bottom. You do not want to touch these. You don't want to be throwing them about or nothing like that, or dropping them, because you will bend these pins and that can damage the CPU. Okay. Now AMD are slightly different to Intel. As I said, the pins are on the motherboard for Intel, and the chip hasn't got no pins on the back. So inside here we have just our little holes to put our pins into, and we're just going to line those up. So we'll take a closer look at the board, and you'll see there is a pattern to there, and you can see the little triangle in the top right hand corner. So all you need to do is inspect the board or inspect your manual, and then offer up your chip and then just drop her straight in. That's your last chance to inspect the pins, make sure none are bent, and you can see there is a little triangle on the bottom and on the other side of the chip. You just line them up and drop her straight in. Now you want to try and keep your fingers off of the actual chip itself because of oily residue from your fingers, but we're going to be using isopropanol to clean that anyway, and I don't see a lot of people cleaning the top of the CPU or the heatsink before they use it. And when these get out of the manufacturer's factory, they do come with a bit of dirt and grease on them. So as you can see, we're going to be using isopropanol here. We're just going to rub a bit of that onto the chip and clean this up. Now this is another method I don't see a lot of people doing, but you should do it and get used to doing it and cleaning off any oily residue from the manufacturers when they've built these chips. And also the same thing with any component you use, i.e. the heatsink. Just give that a little rub on the bottom and that should clean that right up. And you'll probably find there'll be a little metal residue left behind as well from the machining of these. So here we're going to be using our stock heatsink for this. I was going to use the low profile heatsink, but there was a problem with the bracket. They sent the wrong bracket, so we're going to have to use the stock one. As you can see, they've got these little clips on the side here. They're slightly different to, well, they're not slightly different, they're a lot different to Intel, and this method's been used for AMD for a long time. You can see this will be an Intel type bracket. Now this comes with the compound on the bottom already, evenly spaced out, so we're just going to offer this up. And you can see there is a 4-pin CPU plug. So it's just going to take your time here. Now you don't want to be moving this about too much, just try and get the little clip in there. It's pretty difficult to do this and film at the same time because the tripod's in the way. Just try to hold that one underneath, and then once you get that underneath, just pull it straight down. You'll find a bit of resistance there, but once you get it in, it should be okay. They're a bit fiddly. There you go. Now once you've done that, you want to pull this lever back and you'll feel the tension. Okay, that's pretty normal. And now you should have a nice tight heatsink. All we need to do now is plug it in. Pretty simple stuff really. Now I find the most difficult part with building computers is not actually putting them together, it's actually picking the components to go with each other. That's probably the most difficult part when it comes to building a PC. Now all you need to do here now is pull these little tabs down. Now sometimes these come with 2 tabs on the right hand side and none on the left. Here is our memory. But these have the 4 tabs. So we're just going to pull this memory out, and as you can see this has a 1.65 volts of memory, 99924, and also it's 4 GB and 1600 megahertz. Now all these speeds, timings and stuff, that should be automatically detected in the BIOS. There's a little notch, and you can see the notch on the motherboard. Pretty straightforward stuff really. Slot this in and click it in, and you should hear a clicking sound, and that's pretty normal. I mean, if you can't put a slot of memory in, then something's wrong somewhere. But here you can see it's got a nice heat shield on the memory, and it's a nice chroming to the memory there. I do like the look of this memory, it's pretty nice for the money we paid. It's made by Corsair, good build quality. So again, we just need to offer this up and just make sure the notches are lined up, and pretty much you're good to go. Now once this is all in, what you can do is put all your components together while it's on the box and fire it up and do a test to make sure you get the BIOS. Now once you've done that, you know the motherboard's in good working order and you can offer it up. I'm not going to show you that part in the video, but I wish I did, because we did have problems once we finished the build. So we're going to remove this bar here, and this bar is a tension bar that holds the case together because there's no sides to it, so it makes it a bit more flimsy. So it's just a strengthening bar, and also if you put anything on top of it, like another component, like another, say a DVD or something like that, it will make it a bit more rigid. Now we've got that, we need to put our I/O shield in. So we're just going to offer that up and push that in. These just push in really. They're pretty straightforward to do. No difficulty there, and that comes with your motherboard. Now what we're going to do here is, you can see we've got some standoffs already into this case, and these come already molded into the case. Now you may need to add 1 or 2 more, but that does come with spare standoffs. You can see here we need to add 1 more standoff into this location, and you can see they're pretty rigid, they're locked in there, and you can add 1 in here with the packet that you've got, okay, and then you just use a pair of pliers to just tighten them a little bit. So we're just going to put the standoff in with our fingers. You just have to excuse my arm there. You want to make sure you don't cross thread these or anything like that, and you want it tight but not too tight where you bust it, okay, because they're very easy to over tighten these. So just tighten them up with your fingers and then just get a pair of pliers. Like so. That's it. Next thing, we're going to offer up our motherboard. Now once we get the motherboard offered up, you can see on the back of this I/O shield there will be little metal prongs, and you need to make sure that you get those just right. Okay, now I've seen people push these in with the metal prongs down, and then they can't get access to the HDMI or anything like that, and they can get in the way. So you just need to set those up a little bit, and you'll see me doing that in a second because they're getting blocked. So I just lift one of them up. You don't want to cut these off or break them off. There's one more that's in the way. I just need to lift that up, as you can see. And there's one more on the other side as well. And as you can see, I'm slightly to the left hand side here, and that's because the tripod is in the way here, and it can be a bit fiddly sometimes when you're trying to film and put components in. So now we need to just screw the motherboard down. Now don't be over tightening these screws. You don't need to really tighten them right down. They just need to be tight enough just to hold the board into position. It's not going to be going anywhere. It's not going to be moving. So just a normal Phillips screwdriver should be ample. Don't need to use electrical devices or nothing like that to screw these in really. So while I'm screwing these screws into the motherboard, I'm going to give you a couple of pointers to look out for when putting in the motherboard into your case. You want to make sure that you're not leaving any screws behind underneath the motherboard, or any risers that aren't used and they are touching the motherboard, because these can possibly ground out the motherboard if they're not supposed to be in that location. Remember, some cases come with different size motherboards that you can install into them, so sometimes you could have a riser there that's touching the board, and that can end up grounding it out and damaging the motherboard. Never ever screw the motherboard straight to the case. You're going to end up grounding it out and causing damage to the board. And also, another common mistake people make is when sitting the heatsink on, they either don't put no compound on, which is stupid, I know, but they do it, and also don't remove the sticker from the bottom of the heatsink, and they screw that straight down onto the CPU, and of course that causes problems. Also, these are probably common mistakes that people make because they're not used to building computers, but don't be afraid, they are pretty easy to build nowadays, and give them a go. Okay, so that's enough of me ranting on about the do's and the don'ts. Let's get back to the build. So what we're going to do here is next offer up the DVD player or the Blu-ray player into the bay there. So we need to remove the front plastic on the front here. This just normally pops out or snaps out. I normally like to keep these just in case you ever want to sell the case or take out the Blu-ray player. So now we're just going to offer up the Blu-ray player that goes in from the front, and we're just going to slide that in, and we're going to be putting some screws into this to hold it into position. Now again, you can see there's 4 screws here. Now I've seen people use just 2 screws. Probably 2 screws is going to be ample for this, one diagonally, but I'll put the 4 screws in just for this build, just to make sure it's nice and rigid. But 4 screws in my opinion is a bit overkill for these types of things. They're not going anywhere. I'll show you the 2 screws and then we'll put the other 2 in and then go over to the other side. Now while I'm screwing these screws in, I'm just going to give you a couple of pointers when looking for cases. Now this case, the Silverstone 03 version, there is an 05 version as well, which is the next model up. Now we was going to purchase that version because it is a nicer looking case with slightly better build quality. This is an entry level case. It also come with a slim Blu-ray player slot on the front, which looked really sleek and nice. The downfall size was when you come to purchasing your Blu-ray players, the slimline ones are a lot more expensive. They're about £80 to £90, where this version is £38 or something like that. So you can sort of do the math really. We was trying to keep to a £300 budget, so it wasn't possible to do that in this video, so we had to try to keep it to a tight budget. Okay, but if you money's no expense, then by all means choose your cases how you like, and also chuck as much money as you will. Okay, so that said, this case is still a pretty decent case, being an entry level case. I would just say that bear that in mind when purchasing cases. Now once we've got this done, we're going to offer up the power supply. Now this is a CX430. Now you can get away with a 350 watt power supply in here, but they were the same price at the time. And you can see we've got the vent there. We're going to face the fan down. Now another pitfall which happens when building computers is when you're building computers, you're going to come up against some issues. Now they suggested that you can have a 140mm power supply here. Now you can see by how tight that is against the Blu-ray player there. This is a 140mm power supply, which leaves very little room to plug in your cables. And I'll give you an example in a second. I'll put my fingers and show you down the back. There isn't much room down there. So that said, 140mm, it's very, very tight. I would try and get away with a smaller power supply if you can in depth. Okay, so 140mm is probably a little bit too much. I would go for a little bit less. You can see I'm just barely getting my fingers down there, which doesn't leave much room for the cabling, which was a bit disappointing, but we've now got the power supply and we'll have to stick with it. So we're going to put the cables in first, because we won't be able to get our fingers down to plug the cables in. So this is something that you're going to have to work around. This was my workaround: plug the cables in first and then offer up the power supply. So we're just going to put the SATA cable in and the power cable in from the power supply. Now this is a semi-modular power supply which helps with cable management. Now already I'm using the, as you can see, the type of SATA cables that I'm using, which are the ones that are sort of bent over there, which will help keep the size down. Now we're going to offer this up. I'm going to drop this in. And you can already see I've already got the power cables into the power supply. I've plugged those in also, so I don't have to try to get those in once the power supply is in. Now it's a bit of a jiggle, so I'm just going to wiggle that in. And it doesn't look too bad once I screw it up. It does pull it all in together, and you'll see there is a little bit of room there once I've finished. So let's put some screws into the power supply. I'll just put a couple of screws in and then we'll have a look at how much room we've actually got there. Now if your choice of weapon is electrical screwdriver, by all means you can use those if you wish. I prefer just to use a normal screwdriver. It doesn't save you much time and you don't end up shredding the screws, in my opinion, but that's just mine. So we're just going to tighten a few of these up and then have a look at the gap. Now look how tight that is. That is just, in my opinion, that's just not acceptable, but that's a 140mm gap what they're saying, and you can see that's way too tight. So that needs to be a smaller power supply than 140mm, I would say. So let's put our 24 pin power supply connector in. Again, this is just pretty self-explanatory. Just push that down, and again, there's no screws on the edge of this board here. For some reason they never put screws near the edge of this board, so when you're pushing the power supply in, it does bend a little bit. So we're just tidying these cables up here with one of the cable ties just to keep those back. Doing a bit of cable management as we go. You can see the board bending a little bit there, so they could have put a screw right at the end. So let's just straighten these cables out and put our 4-pin connector into the board here. This is another power pin that you have to put into the board, otherwise you won't get no power. Now that comes as an 8-pin, and you just separate the 8-pin into a 4-pin. Next we're going to put in the SATA cable into the board there. I'll straighten these up a little bit later on. Okay, so next up is the hard drive. So what we're going to need to do here is remove this hard drive docking station here, and remove that and screw that to our hard drive. Now I think they could have come up with a slightly better method than this. I mean, it's just something that rises the hard drive up, but I can't see what benefit it's got. Maybe they could have put some sort of cage there where you could have had 1 or 2 hard drives in there, but one hard drive screwed to this platform thing. I don't know what they were thinking there. But there you go, there's 4 screws that we need to add to this, and then we should be good to go here. So we're going to be screwing these down. I'll just show you a couple of these screws and then we'll offer this up to the case. Now these are the flat type screws that I'm using here. So once we've got this in place, we haven't got much left to do, so bit of tidying up, bit of cable management, and then move on to the next step. So we've got 4 screws in there now, and we're just going to offer this up. And once we've got this in place, we just have to slot it in and then screw down the 2 screws. Now as you can see, it's starting to get very tight in there, and to put these 2 screws in was a bit of a nightmare. It was a bit of an angle, as you can see. But we'll screw these 2 screws down, and then we'll put some cables in. Now I think they could have come up with a better idea of mounting the hard drive itself here, but then I suppose it's all about cost, and they're trying to think of a cheaper way of mounting the hard drive. Now if you're looking for multiple hard drives, then maybe this case is not for you. It's very limited for masses of storage, but you can always put a 4 terabyte drive in there, and that should do you ample. But now you can see here we've done a bit of cable management here, and it looks as good as it's going to get. I've come across the Blu-ray player there with the cables. Lucky enough they're nice and flat, these cables, so it's not so intrusive. And we're going to put some power to this, and the SATA cable, and then we're going to put the audio cable in up the top. As you can see, it's not too bad at the moment, just needs a bit more tidying up, but we're getting there. So we're just going to put some power to the hard drive, and then put the SATA cable in. Now you can see the little notch there, that just offers that up, and then push that in. And then once we've done that, we're getting to near the end. We need to put in some fans, so I'm just going to offer up the SATA cable now. Now we're going to use the bent one here. Comes with 2 SATA cables, this motherboard. And we'll just plug that in, and we'll run that underneath. So just try and find a way through the mass of cables here. You can see I've tidied this up now a little bit and managed to get the SATA cables in there now. So what we can see here, it's all pretty tidy. I've tucked it all underneath. We've gone underneath the actual hard drive here, you can see. Now we need to get the book out and have a look at the power configuration for the front panel of the case. Now this is where the manual comes in handy. It's pretty, when you've built a lot of these, you don't really need to use this manual so much, but the manual does come in handy if you've not built a computer before. It's full of information about SATA pins and stuff like that, and audio cables. As you can see on the cables now, it's HD audio, and all you need to do is go to your book and it will tell you what that is, and you can see it says audio cable, and it will tell you the name and number of that, and it should be that on the board. And if I show you this now, you'll see it gives you the actual number on the board, and that's what it's referring to. So now you need to know that that's where that cable goes to. So you just route it over there and plug it in. It's that simple. People overcomplicate building computers. It's not that difficult. You just follow the guidelines, follow the book, and you should be pretty much good to go. So just get the pin coordination in line with the board and then just push that in, and that's that part done. Little tidy up with the cable, and then once we've done that, we need to do our front panel power cables as well, which are these things here. Now on every case you'll have these. Now as you can see here on the front, we've got power switch, power LED, minus and plus, and you've also got your reset switch, which is your reset switch, and your hard drive LED, and that's to do with the light on the front. The most two important ones are the power LED and the power switch, but you need to put them all on really. And now sometimes you get speaker as well. Now if you look at your manual, inside there will be a pin readout there that you can follow, and there's two parts to this, as you can see, which is the one there, and we're going to look at that on the board. As you can see on the board, that is it there. There's two areas, the 4-pin, which is your speaker, and then you've got your other section, which is for your power LED and your power switch and stuff like that. Okay, so you just follow the manual, and you can see on the back of these there's a little tiny triangle, and that's your plus sign, that's your power, okay, for plus. So you just put that on where the plus sign is, and you should be pretty much good to go. So there they are, all plugged in. Pretty straightforward stuff. And all we need to do now is tidy these cables up. So we'll just tuck these back. And you can see there, that's the readout, the plus and the minus, and you just follow exactly what it says in the book. It's that simple. So we're just going to tie these cables back with a little tie on, and then just tuck them underneath so they're out the way. Now you are going to be limited to how much tidy cable management you can do in this particular type of case because of the size of it. So you're limited to how much you can do really. You've just got to tuck them away and hide them from whatever place you can get, okay, to keep the airflow nice and clear. So there you go, that doesn't look too bad. So now we need to offer up our fans here. Now again, don't buy cheap fans for like £1 or something like that. They're not worth it, okay. Get some good quality fans. They're going to last you a long time and give you good airflow. Now 80mm fans are a bit noisy, but when it comes to this type of device that you're going to be using in your front room, there's not going to be a lot of airflow, so you do need a bit of air. You just offer this up. Now you can see this was a 4-pin plug and a 3-pin on the board, but that's fine, it will still work. You just plug that in. Now the fan that I've got in there is intake, the way it is at the moment, and you want to, if you want it as a and extract, you just need to flip the fan round the other way, and you can have them whichever way you like really. Now you can have up to 4 80mm fans here, but I think that will be a bit overkill and probably a bit noisy. So we're going to start off with 2. Now these come with 4 screws. You just screw these in as you wish. So I'm just going to get this screw out, and then we're just going to put these in, and we're pretty much near enough done now. So I'll just get one in a little bit just to hold it, and then get another screw and we'll screw it right up. Again, the tripod is in the way, and I'm just doing it from the side there, which makes it a bit awkward. But there you go, that's pretty much how you can screw a fan in. You can't get much simpler than that. So there we've got our 2 fans in now. We're going to just put the brace back on to keep this all nice and tight so it don't move about. Screw that down and then put the case back on. So we could probably get this at least cable management a little bit tidier, but I'll give you a general look in a second. Once I've finished screwing that down, we'll have a look at what the finished result is. So a couple of little bit of loose ends that need to be tied up, like the cable management, as I said. But other than that, it don't look too bad, as you can see. Now remember, this is a tiny little case, and it's all packed in there nice and tight. And it's not too bad. So we made best of a bad deal on the power supply issue there. It's not really great, but it's about as good as you're going to get until I replace that power supply with a smaller one, which I will do. As you can see, it looks okay. And there you go. We've got room for a couple of more fans there if we need them in the future, and we can also upgrade the hard drive if need be. So we're just going to put our top back on. And all in all, I've been pretty impressed with the case itself, and the build's turned out okay. It's not been too bad. You're always going to run into some issues when building computers. That's part of the fun, and that's part of the nature of custom built computers. All cases are different, all motherboards are different, all components are different. But other than that, this one turned out okay in the end. We've had a few issues, but we've ironed them out and sorted them out. And as you can see, building a computer isn't difficult, and give it a go, guys, okay? Anyway, so I'm going to wrap this one up. It turned out okay in the end. If you want to build yourself a cheap £300 budget home theatre PC, then this wouldn't be such a bad idea to go with something like this. You can always get a bigger hard drive if you've got a bit more cash, but other than that, it turned out okay. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this helps you out, guys. My name is Brian from briteccomputers.co.uk. If you enjoy these videos, then hit the like button. It really does help me out, get some visibility. Also hit the subscribe button if you want to keep up to date when I upload new videos, okay? So if you've got any video requests, then leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be seeing you again in the next video. Thanks again. Bye for now.